Hello and welcome everyone to the 2026 Women's Voices Conference at the University of Kansas. I'm Professor Jacquelene Brinton. I'm the chair and associate professor in the Department of Religious Studies at KU. The conference is being sponsored by the Department of Religious Studies and by the KU Department of African and African American Studies. We have the chair in the back, and the Kansas African Studies Center, and we have the director of Kansas African Studies Center here too. Dr. Rohina Moazu, who's right here, and who's an assistant professor in the Department of AAAS, African and African American Studies at KU. She and I conceived of this conference after discussions we had about the increasingly important role of female preachers and female religious authorities in African Islam. We also agreed that there has not been enough academic attention on the subject. So today we're pleased to bring together in this conference a group of scholars who are engaged with the topic of women's voices in Islam. Many of these scholars also have firsthand experience. And we're also excited to foster more conversations about this important topic. We hope that this scholarly endeavor will continue into the future as well. The papers that we will hear over the next few days will examine the history, practice, significance, and impact of Muslim female preachers and religious actors in Africa, focusing on their roles and contributions and the challenges they face within diverse cultural, social, geographic, historical, and theological contexts. Because of the nature of the papers that we received, the conference shifted a little bit. The entire conference is not focused on preachers, but it's all focused on different diverse cultural, social, and historical issues. Dr. Moazu and I are very, very honored to have Dr. Reham Salamah join us as our keynote speaker for the conference. Dr. Salamah is General Director of the Al-Azhar Observatory for Combating Extremism and Associate Professor of the Urdu Language and Literature at Al-Azhar University in Egypt. She is an academic, policy expert, and international practitioner, specializing in countering violent extremism, interreligious dialogue, and education for peace and social justice or social cohesion. Over the last with over 15 years of experience, she has represented Al-Azhar and partner institutions at UNESCO conferences, OSCE forums, United Nations related meetings, and the Global Counterterrorism Forum and Strong Cities Network, and at the G20 Interfaith Forum. You're a very busy lady. In 2024, she was honored by the President of Egypt as one of the top 10 Women of the Year. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Salamah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacquelene. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Dr. Rahina. Thank you to my dear friend Ahmed Sobhi, who I have been working with him actually in the observatory for nearly 5 years, and then he left us to gain more and more knowledge and expertise here in the United States of America. But still, we are friends and related because of our work and because of the humanitarian connections that we do have. Distinguished scholars, it's a pleasant to be here with you today. And as I said, I can't thank you enough for all your assistance, and Albert and Dr. Rahina's, which gave me this opportunity to be talking a little about myself, more about women in Africa and the Islamic world. Maybe tomorrow I will be focusing more on my very personal experience. But I will start with it anyway, even today, though my main focus is the most significant figures and the most prominent roles by women or Muslim women in Africa and the Arab region. That's the main focus of my paper. As Dr. Jacquelene, you mentioned, I'm Reham Abdullah Salamah. I'm from Egypt. I have been learning and teaching in Al-Azhar University since years now. I was appointed as a lecturer in 2006 in the Department of Urdu Language and Literature in the Al-Azhar University, and then started my journey in combating extremism in 2015. Al-Azhar was established in 971. So you're talking about a legacy of 1,055 years. It is located in Egypt, but it's not confined to its boundaries. We are talking about more than 67,000 foreigner students studying at Al-Azhar in Egypt from 138 different countries. It was in Al-Azhar that I learned that a woman is a full human being. It was in Al-Azhar that I learned that the source of wisdom and the wellspring of all virtues and values is in the mind. This quote has been quoted by Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he was the Khalifa of the Muslims, the fourth Khalifa. He said that رأس الفضائل وينبوع الأدب هو العقل الذي جعله الله للدين أصلا وللدنيا عمادا, which means that this mind, as I have just said that it's the wellspring of all virtues and values. So this mind, ladies and gentlemen, is not confined to whether it's at the head of a male or a female. But this is how Allah has distinguished human beings from any other creature. I learned in Al-Azhar that Islam never oppressed women, but some males or men, which I bet I call them male more than men. Okay, some males and females did. So the oppression never came from Islam or its principles, ever, but it came from the practices of few males and females. I stand before you here today as a product of the history that I will recount, that we have, and I would like to thank the English unit at the observatory, which actually collected some very important information for me here so that I can represent it to you and recount, and even, yes, remind myself of these beautiful figures of history that unfortunately has been forgotten by us, or even not, it's not the case of forgotten, but even not known very well by us Muslims. Me and my colleagues represent the first generation of women to hold senior leadership positions within Al-Azhar. And we did not arrive there by accident, nor against the grain of Islamic tradition. But I arrived there, and we, my other colleagues, arrived there because of this Islamic tradition. The history of Muslim women in Africa and the Arab region is not a marginal footnote to Islamic civilization. It's one of its load-bearing pillars. And today, I would like to take you through that history, not as an argument to be made, but as a foundation already laid, one that women like myself are simply continuing to build upon. From the earliest generations of Islam until the modern era, women have acted as scholars, as jurists, rulers, founders of universities, transmitters of hadith, which means prophetic narrations, Sufi leaders, anti-colonial activists, reformers, educators, and builders of social cohesion. Their contributions were neither exceptional anomalies nor modern inventions. They were integral components of Islamic history itself. First, I would like to shed light upon the foundational era about women in early and classical Islam. So I'm starting from the very beginning till I reach to what we have reached today in Egypt and in the Islamic world. The narrative of female religious leadership in Islam is far richer and more pervasive than many contemporary accounts suggest. From the earliest days of Islam, women were not merely passive recipients of religious knowledge, but active participants in its transmission, in its interpretation, and institutionalization. No discussion of Muslim women's leadership can begin without acknowledging the role of women in the early Islamic era. And I would like to start with Sayyida Khadija bint Khuwaylid, who was the first believer in Islam and one of the most influential economic figures in Mecca. She was a successful businesswoman, actually. She was a merchant whose financial and emotional support enabled the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the earliest Islamic mission to survive in its most difficult years. Her examples, the example of Khadija bint Khuwaylid, demonstrates that economic agency and religious commitment were never mutually exclusive in Islamic civilization. The foundational role of Lady Aisha bint Abi Bakr stands as a towering testament to female religious authority. Her profound knowledge of hadith, jurisprudence, that means fiqh, and Quranic tafsir, explanation of the Holy Book of Quran, led the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself, declared that followers would receive half of their religion from her, from Aisha. Her intellectual championship and authoritative pronouncements set a precedent for generations of Muslim women scholars. Similarly, Salamah, who was known for her wisdom, political insight, and jurisprudential understanding. During the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, her counsel helped resolve one of the most difficult moments faced by the Muslim community, illustrating the role of women in political consultation and crisis management in the prophetic era. Beyond the mothers of the believers that I have mentioned, Khadija bint Khuwaylid and Aisha bint Abi Bakr, numerous women distinguished themselves as hadith transmitters and faqihat, jurists. A professor called Khalid Abul Fadl, he notes, certain families from Damascus, Cairo, and Baghdad made a virtual tradition of training female transmitters and narrators. And these female scholars regularly trained and certified male and female jurists. The 12th century Sunni scholar Ibn Asakir, who died in 1176, famously studied under 80 different female scholars. Al-Sakhawi, who died in 1497, learned from 68 women. As-Suyuti, who died in 1505, listed 33 women among his 130 teachers. I would like you all to note the dates and the numbers of the scholars, of the women scholars back then. These women were not confined to private domestic circles, not at all. They got out their houses, their safe zones, which we always thought that they had nothing else to do outside the society. Research on Nishapur between the 11th and 13th centuries reveals women teaching in official schools, with seating arrangements suggesting no gender segregation between male and female scholars. They all sat together. Women also served as muftis, issuing legal fatwas on complex matters. Hujayma bint Hayy al-Wasadiyya, who died in 701, who was a jurist in Damascus, taught numerous men and advised Khalifa Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan on legal and political questions. The Shafi'i jurist Amina bint al-Husayn al-Mahmali, who died in 987, was an expert in inheritance law, and Fatima bint Abbas al-Baghdadiyya al-Hamdaliyya, who died in 1333, was a renowned Quranic scholar, acknowledged by Ibn Taymiyyah as an intellectual equal. Now, let's move to women as builders of knowledge in Africa and the Arab region. So shifting from the Islamic era in the very beginning, I would like now to shed light upon women in Africa and the Arab region. And I'm sure that my friends Mariam and Asma and Dr. Rahina, of course, will be doing so. But I'm here focusing more on their religious and their role in preaching. Africa occupies a particularly important place in the history of Muslim women's intellectual leadership. Perhaps the most iconic example is Fatima al-Fihriya, who in 859 founded the Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque and the university in Fez, Morocco, widely recognized as one of the oldest continually operating universities in the whole world. By the way, this piece of information is not known by many, by most. We receive guests from all over the world, ambassadors, vice presidents, ministers, and the observatory, which I have been managing since the past 6 years. And when I usually say this piece of information to tell them that I'm not here alone, I'm continuing what I have learned. They say, okay, please can we note this down? We have never known this before. This is a good piece of information because that thing that Muslim women are always suppressed by Islam is a misconception that needs to be corrected. Even I mean that in high level positions, there are people who does not know this. So the contributions of Fatima al-Fihriya was not symbolic philanthropy. She established an enduring institution that shaped global intellectual history, directly challenging the assumption that Muslim women were historically absent from public intellectual life. In Egypt, we have got a Sayyida Nafisa. She died in 824. She was a great scholar of hadith. She was a teacher to none other than Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, the founder of the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. Imam al-Shafi'i reportedly sought her blessings and prayers, underscoring her spiritual and intellectual status. These examples demonstrate that female religious authority was not an anomaly, but an integral, respected, and institutionalized aspect of Islamic civilization. Another remarkable North African figure was As-Sayyida al-Hurra, which means the free lady, the independent lady. The 16th century Muslim ruler of Tetuan in Morocco, which I will be going soon after this conference and another conference in Tetuan, she became one of the most influential political leaders in the Western Mediterranean, negotiating with empires and resisting Portuguese expansion. Her leadership demonstrated the capacity of Muslim women to exercise sovereignty and military authority during periods of geopolitical upheaval. In Syria, the scholar Karima al-Marwaziyya became one of the most authoritative transmitters of Sahih al-Bukhari. Her narrations were sought by leading scholars across the Islamic world, demonstrating the institutional legitimacy women possessed within classical Islamic academia. In West Africa, Nana Asma of the Sokoto Caliphate in 19th century Nigeria remains among the most important Muslim intellectuals in African history. Daughter of Sheikh Othman Dan Fodio, she was a poet, a scholar, a linguist, and educator who established networks of female scholars or teachers known as the Yan Taru movement. Through this initiative, she expanded literacy and Islamic education among women across the region. A sophisticated model of grassroots educational reform led by a Muslim woman, long before modern state educational systems emerged in Africa. So in Sudan, in Nigeria, in Mali, Senegal, and Mauritania, women historically participated in Quranic education, Sufi movements, and scholarly transmission networks. Women within the Al-Tijaniya and Al-Qadiriyya Sufi orders became respected spiritual educators and figures and preservers of communal religious identity across generations. Okay, so now I would like to shed light upon women and Sufi spiritual leadership. The spiritual dimensions of Islamic civilization produce some of its most consequential female figures, and none more transformative than Rabi'a al-Adawiyya of Basra, who died in 801. Rabia did not merely participate in the Sufi tradition, she helped define it. Her theology of mahabba, which means love, pure divine love, untethered from fear of punishment or hope of reward, reoriented Islamic spirituality around an intimate, unconditional relationship with Allah, with God. Her famous supplication captures this precisely. She asked God to grant her his love, not for the sake of paradise, nor out of fear of hellfire, but for his own sake alone. That theological move, stripping religious devotion of transactional motivation, influenced Al-Ghazali, Ibn al-Arabi, and Rumi, three of most formidable thinkers of Islamic intellectual history. She taught them across centuries through the power of her ideas. This matters beyond the history of mysticism. Extremist ideologies at their core transactional. They offer paradise in exchange for violence and threaten hellfire for disobedience. Rabia's theology is one of the Islam's oldest and most devastating intellectual counters to that logic. A woman built that counter-argument 12 centuries before counter-extremism became a field of study. In North and West Africa, women within the Al-Tijaniya and Al-Qadiriyya Sufi orders did not merely receive spiritual instruction, they transmitted it. Female spiritual guides arbitrated community disputes, preserved local religious memory during periods of colonial disruption, and maintained the ethical coherence of Muslim communities under external pressure. In Senegal, Mauritania, and Mali, these women operated as what we might today call community resilience networks, informal, spiritually grounded, and remarkably durable. Their authority was not granted by a state institution or a ministerial decree. It was earned. It was earned through decades of scholarship, ethical example, and communal trust. And that is a different kind of religious authority, and in many ways, a very much more demanding one. Now, I would like to shed light upon women in anti-colonial resistance and national liberation. If the medieval period reveals Muslim women as builders of knowledge, and the Sufi tradition reveals them as architects of spiritual thought, the colonial period reveals them as something else entirely. The conscience and backbone of Muslim communities under the existential threat. In Algeria, we can never forget Jamila Bouhrit. She became one of the most recognizable faces of the anti-colonial struggle, not because she sought symbolism, but because she accepted cost. A member of the National Liberation Front, she was arrested by French paratroopers in 1957, subjected to torture, and tried before a military court that expected her to surrender, but she did not. Her composure under state violence, grounded by her own account in faith, transformed her into a figure that transcended Algeria. She demonstrated that Muslim women's resistance was not incidental to their religious identity. It was an expression of it. In Libya, women sustained the resistance networks around Omar al-Mukhtar during the Italian occupation, carrying information, sheltering fighters, maintaining community infrastructure under conditions of extreme danger. Their contribution rarely appears in official history, but it was operationally indispensable. In Sudan, women drew on a tradition of political participation, rooted in the pre-Islamic Kandaka, the warrior queen tradition of ancient Kush, which has been absorbed and adapted within Sudanese Islamic culture. Women participated in Mahdist resistance movements and later in the nationalist mobilization that shaped Sudanese independence. In Palestine, Muslim women have sustained educational institutions, journalistic networks, and humanitarian infrastructure across generations of political rupture. Their resilience is not passive endurance, it's an active, organized, and theologically informed practice of communal preservation. What connects these women across different countries and centuries is a consistent pattern. When Islamic communities face destruction, whether it's colonial, whether it's military or ideological, women do not retreat to the margins. They move to the center. They become the keepers of identity, the transmitters of memory, and the organizers of survival. That is not a modern discovery. It's an ancient Islamic reality. And it's precisely why the most effective voices against extremism today are women. Because extremism at its core is an assault on the fullness of Islamic tradition. And women have always been among that tradition's most determined defenders. To conclude, the story that I have told today moves from Khadija's trading caravans in the 7th century Mecca to Fatima al-Fahriya's university in the 9th century Fez, to Nana Asma's grassroots classrooms in 19th century Nigeria, and it does not stop there. It continues in Cairo today, where Al-Azhar, for the first time in its 11th century history, is led in part by women. Women who now sit at the table where decisions are made about religious guidance, counter-extremism strategy, and future of Islamic thought for over 1 billion Muslims. I do not say this to make a political claim. I say it because it is historically true and because it matters for the subject of this conference. Extremism thrives where authentic tradition is forgotten. And the authentic Islamic tradition, as this keynote has demonstrated, has always included the scholarship, the leadership, and more moral authority of women. When Al-Azhar appoints women to lead its counter-extremism work, it's not making a concession to modernity, it's recovering a memory. The future of Muslim societies depends not on inventing new roles for women, but on reconnecting with the roles they have always led as scholars, as jurists, as educators, institutional builders, and guardians of the faith's intellectual integrity. We are not pioneers into unknown territory. We are hires returning to a house that was always ours. Thank you very much.